It is. It is November 27th, 2020, and I want to talk to you today about risk. Why? If you're a writer, if you're an artist, you are going to live a life with risk. Career risk, financial risk, emotional risk, dramatic risk. It's not a great word, is it? Risk. It just doesn't roll off the tongue quite right. In any event, it's true. And what that means is you need to know what it is, and you need to have some measure of control over your relationship to it. And in my view, that means assessing it, managing it, and to some extent, learning how to recover from it. This is not a self-help discussion. This is an art discussion. But it's helpful, I think, to have a general conceptual framework around the life that you're living, the world that you're in, because it gives you a vocabulary to help you think through what you're going through and then choose a relationship to it and then enact it. Get on with it. Do it. I'm currently reading At the Existentialist Cafe, which is charming and interesting and fun, and I recommend the book. I mean, I'm only 50, 60 pages into it, but I'm happy to give it my. Nobody cares what I think. Anyway, what's fun about it, reading about the existentialists in relationship to this, is Sartre and all these guys, and Beauvoir, who's not a guy, are talking about living that authentic life, but more importantly, issues of freedom and issues of choice. If you, in that book and in the stuff that the author, used to study it, there's a lot of discussion about the anxiety around freedom and around choice. Yeah, and I agree with that, but if I was sitting at the table with my own apricot cocktail, I would say anxiety is pointless. It's useless. I, for example, am, despite being a Northeast intellectual Jew, I don't do the Woody Allen stuff. It's. I mean, I suppose if you can make a buck from the jokes, then fine. But this is not a way to live. It's funny to watch. It's not something to immerse yourself in. I'm not talking about his extracurricular activities. I'm just talking about the persona that he's used. Anxiety is unhelpful. I realize that some people suffer from anxiety. I'm not talking about you. I'm not talking about people with mental health issues. I'm not talking about any of that. I don't want to blow back from this. What I'm saying is that if you recognizing your own state of anxiety in the face of the monumental choices that have to be made is not a sufficient recognition. It's not good enough. It lacks pragmatism, which is also a nice Northeast William Jamesy kind of way of looking at the world. Charles Sanders Peirce, the rest of that. What does all this mean? It means when faced with choice, when living a life of choice, and as a writer, as an artist, that's what you're doing. A better way of thinking about choice rather than anxiety is thinking about it in terms of risk. What kinds of risk? I'm not going to build up a whole big thing about it, but just for a few seconds here. One of them is your career risk. Money. How are you going to make a buck, right? Some of you are going to have other solutions because you're already wealthy. You get a trust fund. Fine. I don't judge. I think it's great. Congratulations, you lucky devil. For everyone else, there is, particularly the Americans out there, there is this American trope that you have to hurl yourself in to your art. You have to forsake everything else. You have to embrace the terror of the artistic experience. Only if you go the full Hemingway will anything you do be of true significance and value. This is all make believe. It's very sexy. It's very romantic. It appeals to something bold in us, right? Fortune favors the brave. You know, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and all the other cliches and tropes that we can use. But it's really pretty dumb. And in fact, if you read books, not so much about art, but you read books about innovation, which I've done ad nauseum for my other work on design and public policy and other stuff, what you tend to find is that the biggest innovators are not the people who necessarily took the biggest risks. They're the people who better managed the risks they were taking. What that means is they didn't quit their job and go and try and invent a better mousetrap. What they did is they kept a job, maybe worked part-time, maybe did something mentally or emotionally less exhausting to make space for the thing that was driving their passion. And I think being an artist or being an innovator, scientific innovator, is very similar in that sense, which is that you have a hunger to engage the world in some kind of way. And whatever you're doing all day is inhibiting that. But it's also making it possible because food is yummy and you're going to want some. So putting yourself in a position where stress, anxiety, the terror of your next meal is competing with your artistic aspirations is pointless. Nobody's in a good mood when they're hungry. You know, nobody's friendly when they've been without sleep for, 48 hours. You don't structurally put yourself in a situation where managing your situation is the source of your attention or the draw for your attention. There's a better way of phrasing it, and I no longer care. What's that Kenny Rogers song? I just checked in to see what condition my condition was in. You don't want to spend all your time thinking about the condition. It's a great song, but that's not what you want to be doing. So my recommendation, flat out recommendation, is keep the job, do the art, find the time. Don't find the time, make the time. There's no time. There's no time out there. There's no time. And it's a trite observation that you will find in the self-help sections of your local Barnes & Noble, but it still remains a terrifying fact that we have as many hours in a day as Leonardo da Vinci did. We are all unable to use them in any way that resembles how Leonardo da Vinci used his time. But I would suggest forgetting that part because who needs the pressure? That's not a comparison you need. But it is helpful to remember that we are mortal and we're still on the same planet and it keeps spinning around and it keeps doing this sort of thing as it's spinning through the universe. And so you got to figure out what you're going to do with it. The first thing is don't make yourself nuts. So that's my career advice for 8 minutes. Let's do this. Now let's talk for a second about opportunity cost. This one is harder in my view because the other one has a clear answer. This one does not. When I was in high school, I was a visual artist. I mean, I took all the classes and stuff, but that's how I sort of identified myself. It's what I did. It's the crowd I ran with. I wasn't a geek. I got along with everybody. I wasn't one of those people, but the slightly rebellious spirit appealed to me, but I also liked charcoals and pastels. I just really liked working with them, and watching it come alive was fabulous. I had a dream when I was in high school. And the dream was that I was walking through a museum, a big sort of like, Metropolitan Museum of Art or the Louvre or something like that, both of which I'd been to by that point. And in this dream, keeping in mind it's a dream, so who knows the truth of what I'm going to say, but this is how I experienced and remembered it. It was filled with the usual stuff, right? So oil paintings and sculptures and, big sort of Baroque frames and, everything you would typically think of. in that kind of a museum. You know, not the Guggenheim, but something like that. And I remembered some of them. You know, in particular, I remember there was one that was it doesn't matter, but there was one that had camels and Arabs and sand, and they were walking in a caravan from one side to the other, and the colors and the curves and the lighting was beautiful, and it was just very engaging and whatever. And there are many of them, including, as I said, sculpture, which I really didn't work in. I had to take some classes, you know, we did stuff, but I didn't dig it the way that I liked charcoals and pastels. Anyway, wake up, and nothing happens, so to speak, in the dream, and yet it changed me forever. And here I am, almost 50 years old, and I remember it pretty vividly. I woke up, thought of the dream, and realized I had never seen any of that art before. None of the pictures, none of the landscapes, none of the portraits, none of the sculptures. These were not Rodins, these were not Monets, these were not whatever, you know, Rembrandts, you know, Basquiat, whatever you're into. It was stuff, my interpretation, that I had invented. These were my paintings. These were my sculptures. This was the museum of my own possibility. This was the intensity and completion of a life's work of my imagination and effort and skill. And I woke up paralyzed. I wasn't terrified. I wasn't scared. I wasn't like a tiger was jumping out of the bushes or anything, but I was utterly paralyzed because the first thing was I did not have the skills, the fundamental technical artistic skills to create anything that I had seen. So the journey from where I was to the accomplishment of any one of those paintings was, if not insurmountable, at least, you know, a major apprentice journey to get there. And then there's just the sheer number of them and the variety and the breadth of you say breadth of genres? I don't know, the variety of genres of forms that were there, stuff that was on the wall, all from me, none of which I could produce. And I woke up feeling like, oh my God, how am I ever going to get there? I'll never be able to get there. That's crushing. And the only analogy I can make, and it's not a perfect analogy, but it's just too funny not to mention, is Douglas Adams in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy when they take Zaphod Beetlebrox to the, I want to call it the total perspective vortex or something like that, where you're on a planet, you go into a tiny little house, and that special house has this powerful capacity, either through magic or science, I don't remember, where it shows you in relationship to the entirety of the universe. And your utter insignificance when it's fully revealed to you it blows your mind. I think this is a truly genius idea. That isn't quite what happened, but it was still me in the face of my potential, knowing I would never live up to my potential, and I became paralyzed by indecision and an incapacity to act for a while. My teacher, sorry, I have an itch on my eye that will not go away no matter how much I futz with it. My teacher, Mr. Williman, at one point was watching me draw these really tentative lines, you know, like with a pencil, and they're all just weak. And I can't remember exactly how he phrased it, but he just sort of put his hand on my shoulder and he just said, you know, draw the line. You know, make the picture, do the work. And again, I wish I remembered exactly how he phrased it, but that had a huge impact on me. I genuinely believe I would not be a writer today if he had not just observed my anxiety. Yes, I'm using that old term, having just thrown it out. but it's not. But it is kind of an anxiety in relationship to that problem of choice. But what he said was, in effect, just take a risk, do it. Don't live in the anxiety. Don't roll around in it. Don't define yourself by it. It's not a way of life. Draw the fucking line. So I did. And then I drew that picture, and then I drew another picture, and then I drew another picture. And whatever else happened, pictures were being drawn. And there is simply no universe where pictures being drawn was a worse outcome than the pictures not being drawn. My hand learned, my courage was built, I overcame the anxiety of indecision, I got past the paralysis, and I didn't really become a visual artist, right? But anyway, this isn't a biography, but the point of the story is that, number one, I immortalized, which is a grand word, so bear with me, but I immortalized Mr. Williman's support for me, and he's dead now, sadly. I think it was cancer, but in Quiet Time, which is the Audible original that'll be out in March, when I just inserted him, but as a writing teacher, to talk to Beatrice, who is unable to figure out how to address a homework assignment she was given, a writing homework assignment to tell a story, and she just can't figure out how to do it. And he helps her through that. It's in more words, because I'm wordy. But it's real. So what does that mean when we bring it back to this issue of risk? And this is where I want to end this one, otherwise it'll go on too long. There are other forms of risk. I'll talk about it another day. It means that you have to have the courage to fail in order to succeed. Taking the risk to assess in its entirety the undertaking that you're about to face. Artistically, this is not a science argument, this is not an engineering argument. Artistically, I think it's sometimes a bad idea. You assess it in terms of your career, you assess it in terms of opportunity cost. I could be doing this rather than that. But to some extent, you have to embrace the impulse, the desire to create. Which one is drawing your attention now? And simply accept the ineffable or unnecessary to definableness, all of which is hyphenated, of wanting to do this one now, this story now, this book now. If you sit and think, but I could be working on that book, then you're not following your own curiosity. And it's your curiosity into the written material that drives it. It's not about writing what you know. It's about writing what is compelling you to continue to write. If you want to write about sex or love or peace or justice or truth, if you want to write about vampire sex, if you want to write about, people having sword fights on Mars, it doesn't matter. If your mind is in that, if you're in steampunk, or you're interested in horror, or you're interested in a thriller idea, or you've got an idea for a submarine movie that nobody's ever thought of, rock that story. Just go with it. Don't question it. Don't question it any more than you question your friendships. Why am I friends with you? What the hell's the point? Why? Don't. Why do I love you? I love you, but why? Why do I love you? Don't. It's just stupid. It pops the bubble. It's all a bubble. It's all a crazy bubble. But your job as an artist is to live it. Live the bubble? I just backed myself into live the bubble? Such bad writing. Just at the moment where I just declared how important being a writer was. And that's why being a bad writer can also be fun. Risk the story that is compelling you to do it. Keep your job so that you can create the space to be able to do it. And throw yourself in with abandon to the joy of rolling around in that museum of your own imagination and pull that stuff out of there like one of those things when you were a child and you had a dream that you were holding something that you wanted. It was a gemstone. It's a lover's hand. It's a, well, no one is a child, a lover, but you know what I mean. Somebody you love, and it's their hand, or you know, or I don't care if it's a chocolate bar, or you know, I had a dream I was piloting a spaceship because I was interested in. I watched G-Force, which was some anime from the 70s or something. I can't even remember, and I wanted that ship so badly. And I was piloting it, and I was just sure if I had just held onto those controls a little bit tighter, I could pull it out of the dream world into my real world. I was like 7. That it would be there, and I woke up clutching my sheets, you know? And you can't. But the thing is, in art, you can. It's so cool. You can dream it, and then you can pull it into the reality, and you can put it into the minds of another person where it then lives and takes on its own life. And you can do this with hundreds of thousands or millions of people. And suddenly we're all piloting that spaceship. And we're no longer gripping the sheets because we are in that thing together. And the world, I swear to God, it changes. And it's fun. But it's only fun if you draw the fucking line. So write the story and stop being paralyzed by indecision. Take the risk. Don't roll around in anxiety as a way of life, and pull the things out of the museum and bring them into the real world and show them. And then wait for the critics to go, because they're critics. Who are they? Who are they? Who cares? Who cares? It's like Jerry Seinfeld said, you know, he says, by the time the reviews come out, I've left town. I don't care. Don't care. Do it. Have fun. I hope you found that to be 22 minutes and 20 seconds well spent. And if not, you cannot have your money back. Have a nice day. Go write something. Bye.